Alright everybody, welcome back to another One Piece discussion video. Alright, today we'll be talking about Rataoskr, the Squirrel-Squirrel fruit model Rataoskr. Yes, another mythical ZOAN. Oda has completely lost count how many he's had. So before we begin, please, for me, like, comment, subscribe on this video. Really helps me out against the algorithm. And let's get started. Alright, so listen, I don't know what people were expecting. But for me, when I first saw Ragnir, I first saw the hammer, I was like, okay, that is 90% sure a hammer that was given a squirrel-based devil fruit. Because we know that Zoans have a will of their own. So in its, for example, human form or hammer form, Ragnir, we first see it attack Loki, well, at least chronologically in the story, all right? And so first thing I want to mention, Ragnir's name, all right? There's two parts for this, all right? This comes from the fact that Ragnir is two parts, right? Ragnir comes from two parts. It is from Ragnarok, aka Twilight of the Gods. In Norse mythology, that is the Judgment Day when it's the end of the world for all of the Norse pantheon. And then Nir, that comes from Thor's hammer, Mjolnir. And if you've ever seen God of War series on the PlayStation, that is literally how Mjolnir is depicted. The one in the MCU, or the way it's depicted in the manga with a two giant hammer, that is not how it works. Mjolnir is just a single hammer. All right. So again, when we first saw Ragnir, I was like, this has to be a hammer that ate a mythical squirrel fruit. And yes, Oda has lost count, right? Small tangent. When One Piece started, let's say Marineford, Kizaru had the famous line, hey, mythical zones, even more rarer than Logia type fruits, all right? We thought mythical zones, there's endless possibilities. There could be an angel mythical zone. There could be a chimera mythical zone. There could be a Byaku, a white tiger mythical zone. If you know about the Chinese zodiac in the four, Kaido's Azure Dragon is the east, the tiger would be the west, the black tortoise and the snake would be north, and the vermilion bird would be in the south. So again, we were thinking, oh, possibilities are endless, but he did say they were rarer than Logias. We're up to 18 now in this story. Yes, with Ragnir, there is 18 mythical zones in this series, okay? 18, all right? And if you include the Gorosei, obviously that's 18. But if you subtract them out, that's 13. There are 13 confirmed Logias. So, yes, Oda's going to have to... Either the Gorosei's powers are not based off mythical creatures, which they may be powers they got via Emu, and they're not typical devil fruits, or they are mythical zones. I mean, we even had, like, the types they were. But... tangent for another day. Yeah, Oda's gonna have to get on that because right now we're way past the point of like, oh yeah, mythical zones, they're rarer than Logias. No, we passed that ship a long time ago. We've had 3 this arc alone, all right? So the purpose of this video is for me to kind of go over Rataoskr and the Norse mythology, and then I'm gonna segue into Rataoskr in the One Piece world, all right? So what is Rataoskr? Okay, if you're like me and you've pretty new to Norse mythology, your first exposure to it was in the God of War, a Norse saga, all right? You probably knew a few things about Thor, Odin, Balder. You knew some basic things, but you didn't know too much about Norse mythology, all right? Well, first thing about Rataoskr's name, all right? The breakdown of it. The Rata and Toskr. All right, so it generally means the Rata can basically come to the meaning the word traveler. And the Toskr is probably a loan word they got from Old English or Germanic language, and it essentially means the tusk. So Rataoskr essentially is the tusk traveler, or another way of looking at it, it is the drill tooth or the boar tooth, because this is what happens in Norse mythology. You have the Yggdrasil, the world tree. Okay, if you wonder where I got the tree from, that's exactly where it is, the world tree. All right. And in the world tree, you've got a few creatures on that tend to it, or at least live on it. You have a giant world eagle at the top of it, all right? That sits at the very top of the world tree, all right? Then you've got these deer that are grazing on the leaves and gnawing on it. Then at the very bottom of it, you have the Needhawk, all right? A draconic-like creature that basically chews on the weeds to prevent overgrowth and making sure that this doesn't happen, and punishing wicked souls, all right? That's how it goes, all right? If you wonder why Loki was chained up at the bottom of the world tree, there you go. That's where that reference comes from. So there you go. And so with the Needhawk fruit, not the Needhawk fruit, but the Rataoskr fruit, it's based off the Rataoskr from Norse mythology. And so Rataoskr in Norse mythology is effectively kind of a giant prick. Not a giant prick, but a little bit of essentially he's an instigator and a gaslighter. Because in Norse mythology, The eagle that's at the top of the world tree and the Needhawk at the bottom of the tree, they do not like each other. They hate each other with a burning passion, all right? And you got to ask, why? They never interact. What's going on? Well, there's a reason for this, okay? In the Norse sagas, you have the eagle at the top of the tree and the Needhawk just chilling, minding their own business, and then suddenly you have Rataoskr, the squirrel, come down and essentially say, "Hey, Needhawk, did you hear the eagle at the top of the tree called you a little pussy bitch?" And he says, and he slept with your mom. And Needhawk is like, "The hell he said? Tell him I'm gonna go up there and eat his eggs, and I totally cuckolded him and his brother by laying my eggs in his nest." All right. The Rataoskr goes up and repeats what he just heard and adds more shit. So Rataoskr essentially is a gossip squirrel in the literal sense, and that he's going up and basically instigating beef between the eagle and the Needhawk for reasons I don't understand. I think he's just doing this for the sheer love of the game. All right. And so this just comes down from the idea that Rataoskr essentially is a giant troll who basically loves to stir the pot for no reason. He's just doing this in Norse mythology. All right. Norse mythology is a lot less, I'd say, chaotic in some aspects than Greek mythology, because Greek mythology, 90% of the problems, you just look at Zeus being a prick. And ironically, Hades and Ares are actually pretty chill guys, all things considered. Yeah, Ares is violent, but he's the god of war, so we're not going to really care about that. And Hades is actually an honorable dude who loves his wife and just wants to play with his dogs. So yeah, a lot more chill in Norse mythology, all right? Yeah, you got the occasional Thor putting on a dress and slaughtering a bunch of giants, and you've got Odin ripping out his eye, Mimir getting his head chopped off. But, other than that, it's pretty good. Pretty chill by comparison to the Greeks. All right. And so then you have got the idea of the Rataoskr, right? So he's basically doing this, instigating beef between the two of them. All right. And so this kind of gets into that theory. Okay. So then what's going on? What's Rataoskr doing? Well, essentially, he's just bored. All right. He's not a god. He's not a legendary. He's more of a mythical creature or a celestial being, if we're being accurate. And he's just basically doing this for the love of the game. All right. Now, that's the Norse side of things. All right. Now we can talk about the other spectrum of this. All right, we have Rataoskr, the ice squirrel. Okay, again, gonna keep saying this. We have completely lost the point. Mythical zoans are not rarer than Logias. We're nearly a third more than them, and we've got so many. And we've got 3 in this arc alone. All right, we had like 6 in Wano. I mean, Wano was a very long arc, so a little bit of an asterisk there. But we got like 6 in Wano. We got 5 in Egghead. So again, we're just pumping them through, all right? And I get it. As the story goes on, you're going to need powers that fit whatever is going on, like Killingham's dream powers, or in Loki's case, it was kind of obvious that he was a Needhawk because, again, he's chained at the bottom of the world serpent tree, and as soon as you see him fight, you see like this draconic features in his battle against Harold, so that made sense. But some people were doubting, Rataoskr is just a mythical squirrel that ate a hammer fruit. No. He is a hammer. He was the hammer of the previous war god of Elbaf, the previous Needhawk user, and he essentially had a hammer that could turn into a mythical squirrel. Now, this gets into some questions because it was revealed a while back, pre-timeskip, that Vegapunk had figured out how to synthesize devil fruits into objects. And is this some kind of lost skill that doesn't exist anymore? Because we've seen other powers exist. We've seen other fruits that do this before. We see in Wano Kettle that ate a tanuki fruit. We see, obviously, Spondum's elephant sword. And then, obviously, we have essentially what was the ultimate weapon right now is Ragnir, a hammer that ate mythical squirrel fruit, all right? Because Ragnir was the trusty companion of the war god of Elbaf, all right, in the Void Center, all right? Someone who followed alongside him, Emu himself, in his nostalgia trip where he's remembering the good old days with his boys, Joy Boy, Needhawk, Rataoskr. Except that prick Davy Jones, he can suck it. And he's just like remembering all his wonderful past. And he remembers Rataoskr. And Rataoskr is just absolutely just tearing into Emo. Basically, it's giving him saying squeeze, 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 gee, gee, gee. He's like a bunch of curse words. Now, people said, hey, why don't we call Chopper over here to see what he could say? And here's the thing. I don't think Chopper could understand what Rataoskr is saying. Because here's the thing about Rataoskr. He was living in the Void Century about 800 years ago, okay? If you take somebody and who was living in England, and say, for example, it's the year 2026. So let's say let's be generous and say it's 1226, right? That is in the middle of what is the Plantagenet dynasty, all right? If you take somebody speaking, a peasant, they will be speaking Old English, okay? And you will not be able to understand every word they're saying. They will be speaking out in some kind of like essentially what is a foreign language to you. You won't understand what they're saying or what they're doing. You'll just be like, wait, what are they saying? You may be able to pick out a few words here and there, but by the 1200s, peasants spoke basically what is Old English, or what is equivalent Chaucer, and the aristocracy were speaking French. If you spoke to a noble, you probably had a better chance of understanding them because they were speaking at least classical French and old school French. So they had different languages between the aristocracy and the top. So if Chopper tried to speak to Rataoskr, I think Rataoskr would just basically be speaking Old English, and Chopper would be like, yeah, he's speaking a language I don't understand. I can't speak freaking Old Norse, all right? And so how he's able to communicate with Loki, I like to think that he's so bonded with the previous user of the war god of Nidhogg's fruit that he can has like this telepathic link, or when anybody's touching him, he communicates them telepathically. Again, magic squirrel, okay? I don't know, whatever the plot needs, all right? At this point, Oda's like, you're a magic squirrel, you got the powers I need, good, you're golden, okay? So now that we've talked about the whole mythology side, let's talk about Rataoskr, the actual fruit, the actual power itself, because this gets a little interesting, okay? So Rataoskr, we know, was during the Void Century, fought alongside the previous Nidhogg user, the war god of Elbaf, who I'd like to believe his name was Fable, and when he died, they basically flipped his name, turned into Elbaf, because Elbaf was also known as Warland, okay? It's not uncommon for countries to be named after their monarch. Let's see Saudi Arabia, the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. It's not unusual for them to be named after their ruling family or king. So they had like the Song Dynasty in China. They call it the Song Dynasty China, or Song China. So it's not uncommon to see that. So I like to believe that Elbaf's name was named after the previous war god before Loki, okay? And so then you see Rataoskr. Rataoskr was with him through all of this, and Emu recognizes him. Emu was like, Ragnir, thou art as I remember thee. You've waited all these years for a new master. And then you see Ragnir basically just tell Emu to just basically suck his chipmunk squirrel's nutsack or whatever the hell's got going on. We don't know what he says. If we could call Kronk from the Emperor's New Groove, that big lughead, he could translate, but he'd be like, dude, he basically cussed you out. What can he do? And so that basically leads to the second part about this video, okay? About what Ragnir is. Because Ragnir is essentially bound to the Nidhogg use, all right? So the way I look at this is they are a package deal. Ragnir refused to basically either just whittle away, break his hammer powers or anything. He liked being with the war god of Elbaf so much, he basically decided to stick by his fruit for centuries. Because, again, 800 years has passed between Loki for 14 years ago. The Void Century happened 800 years ago. Well, started 900 years ago, but it ended 800 years ago. So, for all we know, for over 800 years, Ragnir has essentially been bound to the Nidhogg fruit on Elbaf. And according to Harold, other people have tried. Other giants, kings of Elbaf in the centuries have tried to eat the Nidhogg fruit, claim it, and wield Ragnir, okay? And this gets me to question, okay? Because here's the thing. Giants, on average, can live about 300 years old. So let's say it was even 800 years ago, right? That means 3, 6, give or take 9. So that means Harold would be the 4th generation, assuming all those kings lived to full lives and died natural deaths. Then that would mean Harold would have been like the 4th generation of kings who failed to try to claim Nidhogg. We don't know if other giants have tried. I'm going to assume they have, but none of them could match Ragnir's power, because Ragnir was obviously judging people based off what he knew to be his master's power, all right? What he thought, okay, these people have, my next master has to be able to injure me, all right? If he cannot, if he's not an ancient giant with conqueror's hockey, he is not worth a damn to me, all right? And Ragnir made this very clear, right? When he attacked Loki, he didn't care. He's like, I need to see how tough you are, if you are worthy of claiming me of wielding me as my master, if you're worthy, all right? We don't know if it has to be a giant or not. Ragnir could have taken a human, but I like to think Ragnir was waiting for a giant, someone worthy to wield him, because he stood by that fruit for centuries, all right? For centuries since the Void Century, right? Because Ragnir probably knows what happened in the Void Century, at least from the Elbath perspective. And so he stays by that power for years, going through giants after giants. And then finally on the day when Harold was born, Harold was obviously an extremely powerful giant. He had Conqueror's Haki. He was a monster in strength, clashing evenly with rocks. And so that begs the question, why didn't Harold ever take the fruit? Well, why didn't he do that? He had the power to do it. He was the king of Elbath. I mean, he certainly could have claimed it. So why didn't Harold ever try to claim Ragnir? Well, the closest I can think is Harold, A, didn't want a devil fruit. You are losing the power to swim. And B, probably this is another way I'm thinking, is that Harold kept that fruit in the case of emergencies, all right? He probably knew about Rox's plan. And remember, Harold, despite being best friends with Rox, never wanted to initiate his plan to join him, eat the Needhog fruit, and help dethrone Emo and take over the world. Harold didn't want to do that. So he basically kept it there as an insurance policy. He's like, okay, if worst comes to worst, I'd rather keep this on ice just for now. If something crazy happens, all right, then I'll bust it out. But until then, I'm going to keep the Needhog fruit on standby. Because Harold, obviously, we know this, exceptionally powerful person. He could have claimed Needhog if he wanted to. He had years to do it, but he just didn't, or he just didn't want to swim. So Harold wisely, probably the wisest decision he's ever made in his life, really, not taking the Needhog fruit, he decides to basically keep it on ice. 14 years ago, Harold basically is duped in a very, very, very dumb decision that he makes, where he basically sells his soul to the devil that is Emu. And he basically ends up in a position where now he has to die, all right? And his men cannot kill him. He rationalizes, okay, there's only one thing in this country with the power to take me, the legendary devil fruit, the Needhog fruit. Loki, my son, you are the only one who can do this. Not your brother. He doesn't got a Hyruden. My son Hyruden, who? I have another son, Hyruden. Oh, yeah, him. Yeah, okay, yeah, he exists. Yeah, forget about him. No, Loki, it's all up to you. You can do this. Loki takes the fruit, and Ragnir attacks him. And in that fight, Ragnir repeatedly is just destroying, laying waste to the Ausch castle. He's just running rampant. And mind you, Harold is basically murking all the guards, stabbing Elder Yarul in the face with a sword. And so we see him clash with Loki. And Loki imbues Conqueror's Haki in his attack, and then he hits Ragnir and in the head, all right? And in his hybrid form, with the hammer sticking out, Ragnir takes a huge bump and he's taking some damage, and Loki's hammer is destroyed. It's gone. And so then we see Ragnir finally, for the first time in 800 years, bow down to Loki, literally gets down and is like, yes, you are my new master. I submit to you, Prince Loki. And he gives him the devil fruit. He even shows him, he's like, here you go. This is it. This is the Needhog fruit. It's yours. Claim it. And when Loki took a bite of it and ate the fruit and transformed, Ragnir was over the moon. Imagine, you are a hammer for 800 years, okay? You are basically just stuck there. You can't eat food. You're basically just chilling there, and you're waiting. Like, what did he even do? Did he just, like, sleep the whole time? Would just be like, wake me up, new giant fighter. And then he would just demolish them and be like, I'll go back to sleep. And so he just stays there for 800 years, basically just waiting for somebody to get to be worthy of him, worthy to be his master, right? And no wonder he was crying tears of joy, because he finally had somebody he could be with. He'd be like, yes, I finally have a master. I finally have someone who can use me. And so with their powers combined, Loki summons a bolt of lightning during his battle against Harold and basically just destroys the top half of his dad's body. And Ragnar's basically just been with Loki ever since. We know that Loki went out to sea for about 8 years and basically was on Menace, basically using a fog to jump government ships, attacking them. And so Loki basically kept doing this up for years. And eventually 6 years ago, we don't know how this happened, but Ragnir basically had been taken with Loki and had been chained up to the bottom of the Atom Tree in Elbath. So that leads some questions like, okay, so what happened on that day? How did Shanks beat him? Because Loki's broken. He has essentially two mythical zones. He has his fruit, all right? He has his fruit, and he's got the Needhog fruit and Ragnir's Rataoskr fruit, okay? Now, what are Rataoskr's abilities? Rataoskr is an ice squirrel, okay? And as far as we can see, he can also more than likely command the powers of other realms because he has a technique called Niflheim. Again, first time I ever get reference to the 9 realms like this is either from the Thor MCU movies or God of War Norse saga. And Niflheim is one of the principal 9 realms, all right? It is the land of ice and cold, all right? It literally is the primordial land of ice in the Norse mythology cosmos, okay? And Ragnir can do that. He can summon ice stacks. We see him when Loki is fighting Gunko alongside Luffy, who's being possessed by Emu. Fire off an attack is like he basically freezes Gunko's body. And Loki himself explained that ice is not going anywhere, okay? So only Ragnir, the squirrel, can undo the ice. So that leaves me, how powerful is this ice? If, say, for example, Sakazuki with his Magu Magu no Mi basically just blast it with magma, could he melt that ice? Maybe. I mean, he's got one of the higher tiers of devil fruits in this series we've seen. Like, I would explain that the magma fruit is the highest end of the offensive spectrum. Maybe, but I doubt it because, again, mythical zones are essentially hacks where you can basically get away with having a power that fits the need for what you want to have. So, again, that checks. And then another thing about Ragnir I like is, unlike Rataoskr in Norse mythology, who is essentially an instigator and a gaslighter, Ragnir is a pretty chill guy. He's just like, he even has the adorable scene where he comforts Luffy, after Nami chews him and Loki out for basically destroying Elbaf more than was already being done, and they just wrecked everything. And you see him just like pat him on the back, like, it's okay, bro. It's okay, I got you. Being his emotional support squirrel for some reason, which didn't know that was a thing, but apparently they exist now, emotional support squirrels. And we see him basically also tell Emu the business. We see him eat food with them. So Ragnir in One Piece world is actually a lot nicer than his mythological counterpart, who's basically gaslighting and instigating shit for the sheer love of the game. I love that. We see his conversations with Emu. We don't know what he says, but he's basically giving Emu, telling him, you suck. I hate you. Because, again, I'll make a video on this later, but it's more than likely that the war god of Elbaf, the previous Needhog user, was fighting alongside Emu's faction and the 20 Kings. And then, when he saw the direction that Emu and the other kingdoms were going, he immediately was like, yo, I'm out. I'm switching sides. Joy Boy, I rock with you. Because Emu said it before, Elbaf is of the D. Don't know what that is, but there's that, all right? So, yeah, that's all of what I'm talking about. I want to talk about Ragnir, his Norse counterpart, the etymology of his name, his history, what he's been going through the last 800 years waiting for a new master, and his abilities. Especially, if you're like me, I think he's got access to all 9 realms. So, Niflheim, Svartalfheim, Elfheim, Vanaheim. Vanaheim probably be like some kind of forest ability. That would be cool if Ragnir had some kind of ability where he could go through Svartalfheim, Dwarf realm, and then you got Vanaheim. That's basically the realm of the Vanir in Norse mythology. Think of it, Freya, like vitality, plants, and nature, and all that stuff. Maybe attack like Midgard. You probably have an attack named Midgard, which is basically Middle Earth, i.e. just regular Earth. So, yeah, I genuinely believe that if Ragnir's power is that he can basically summon the 9 realms, all right? He can basically go through each realm and use a different ability based off that, all right? So anyway, I'm Malik, signing out. Don't forget to please like, comment, subscribe on this video. It really helps me out against the algorithm. I'm a small channel. God bless you all. Have a wonderful day.